We're pleased to welcome Samantha McGuire. Sam is the National Field Director of American Atheists, of which we are affiliated. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Neuropsychology from the University of Massachusetts and a Master of Science in Counseling from Johns Hopkins University. She is also a certified humanist celebrant. Sam's talk is called Do the Things, Building Communities Through Activism. How do we go from inertia to action? There will be plenty of time for questions and a healthy Zoom chat at the conclusion of the presentation. Or should you prefer, you may message a question via the Zoom chat feature. Please mute your mic until it's time to speak and be reminded that we are recording for the FBI. For posterity. So let's enjoy the time, expert, and insights graciously offered to us by Samantha McGuire. Sam, let's create some momentum. We're eager to listen, and we're all yours. Take it away, Sam.
Thanks, Ken. That was quite the intro. You have a voice for radio. That was fantastic.
I have a face for radio, is what most people.
No, I said voice. I didn't say face. So as Ken said in my intro there, I am the National Field Director for American Atheists. And so part of my job, my main part of my job, is to talk to groups like yours and give you pointers on how to do whatever it is to make your group more effective and run better and smoother and get new members and get new interest and get new people involved. So I'm going to give this presentation and I have some slides that I'm going to share, but if you want to interrupt at any point or talk about something that I'm talking about, please feel free to. I really like these to be conversational when we have a group this size. I don't want to just talk at you for an hour. And then if I miss a question in the chat, if one of you can help me find that and point it in my direction, because once I'm sharing my screen, as you know, everything goes away. And then any questions that we have at the end, we can have a conversation about anything that comes up that was maybe not related to the presentation that you're curious to ask about, what American Atheists is doing, things we have available to our affiliates, sort of the direction that the organization is moving in, which frankly, I've been very excited about. So let me go ahead and get my screen up, if it works right. Look good? Thumbs up? Cool. All right. Normally I'm on the other end of this doing all the moderating stuff, so I feel for the moderators and the presenters. So as you mentioned, I am Sam McGuire. Our agenda today is going to be to do an introduction, talk a little bit about where I came from, because it's a lot where you are now. And then we're going to just touch on the US Secular Survey. We've done a lot of talking about this in the past, but I want to present just a particular set of numbers related to community engagement and how it affects our community of non-believers. Then we're going to talk about doing the things, and part of what we talk about at American Atheists and doing the things is our ACEs program. And then, as I mentioned at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers or anything that you have burning that you would like to talk about that American Atheists is up to. So introductions. In addition to the lovely bio that was read, just a little bit about me. In 2013, well, I'd say 2012, I went to the first Reason Rally in DC. I grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I moved to Southern Maryland. And I often hear, well, Maryland is pretty liberal, right? It's blue, democratic, good laws, not a lot to fight about in Maryland. But I live in Southern Maryland, which is very conservative, very Republican, very white, and very not diverse and very Christian. So moving from Amherst, Massachusetts, which is a 5-college town, which has a lot of diversity, to that kind of area really had an impact on me. So I found that I had to start kind of defining who I was as a person a lot more than I had to when I lived in the Northeast. And so I went to Reason Rally, and there was like a local secular group where we were, but it kind of sucked, honestly. It wasn't very good. They just wanted to meet in bars, like in the back end of a hotel, and chat about how terrible religion was, and they didn't want to like go out in the community. They didn't want people to know that they were non-religious, and so it just wasn't my scene. And so in 2013, I co-founded the Southern Maryland Area Secular Humanists with a person. It was right about when the Town of Greece case came out, and they were looking for people to interview in our local paper. So they interviewed me and they interviewed this other guy, Jacob, who was my co-founder, and he was like 22 at the time, really young and really excited to get out in the community and build a community of people who were doing good things, but he had none of the administrative organizing skills because he was 22, right? So we banded together and we started a group, and we became part of Washington Area Secular Humanists, which is a regional nonprofit, kind of like your Florida Humanist Association, except for the fact that each of our chapters is actually umbrellaed under the 501c3 of WASH. So there was 9 chapters when I joined WASH. There was 14 by the time I stepped down as president. They spread all the way from Roanoke, Virginia, all the way up to Baltimore, Maryland. So it's a pretty active group, and they do a lot of different things in each of their different chapters. And each chapter, like I said at the beginning, before we started, this talk is not a one-size-fits-all talk. Groups are not one-size-fits-all groups, right? So each of the chapters, even within that organization, have kind of different flavors. So some are more activist-y, some are more community service. And so we see that a lot in groups. In 2016, Reason Rally 2016 happened, and WASH in Washington, D.C. does all of the volunteer work for the last 2 Reason Rallies. So that was a 4-day event in D.C. There was 200 and something volunteers to coordinate across 4 days of events in 6 different hotels. So that was a lot of work. And I was on the board of directors for WASH, and then I started volunteering for American Atheists in 2018 because I was really excited about the sort of direction that the organization was going in. They were moving a lot more into the grassroots and helping local groups have resources and have supplies and have things and toolkits and talking about taking on issues. And it wasn't something that a lot of the other national organizations were doing at that time. So I was really excited to volunteer for them. And then in 2019, I was hired on as national field director. And here I am. So I want to talk for a minute about our US Secular Survey. How many of you took it? None? I know a few did. I see you waving. Yeah, okay. So we sent out the US Secular Survey. This wasn't like just a member survey like on Google Forms or something, right? We actually hired a consulting firm that deals with survey data. They helped us sculpt the data. It actually started back in the 2018 convention. Remember when we could have those in person? That was fun. We did a bunch of focus groups. Actually, sorry, it was 2019 because it was in Cincinnati. We did a bunch of focus groups and we started kind of figuring out what we were going to ask people about. And then we sculpted the survey based on that, and then we coalitioned with all of the national and local secular organizations and pushed it out across all sorts of groups, right? So FFRF, CFI, AHA, they were all pushing it out, Black non-believers, to get us respondents. So our goal was to have it open for 6 weeks and have 5,000 to 10,000 respondents. And within 3 days, we had 34,000. So we had a really great response. It turns out atheists really like to talk about themselves. I know you probably didn't know that, but it's true. So the full report is the reality check was the first one, being religious and non-religious in America, and it's available at secularsurvey.org. We have an add-on report that deals specifically with youth, which is pretty interesting as well. And there's going to be a couple other ones. There's going to be an LGBTQ one on people of color, and a couple of other sort of specialized pieces of data that we're going to have. And it's really exciting because it's the first really big picture of what our community looks like and what issues they want to engage in. So this is just a map that I pulled from it. It talks about community religiosity, right? So how religious is it where you live? Florida's light purple, but I'm sure that you know it's pretty dark purple actually in some areas and pretty light purple in other areas. It's much like Maryland, where there's little blue bubbles and there's little places where it's less religious and more religious in the cities. So this is the data that just pulls everything together by state. And then if you put that map next to how many people experience stigma when they were out in their community, when people found out they were an atheist, you will find, unsurprisingly, and we've always thought this by anecdotal evidence, but we now have actual data showing it, that as states get more religious, people experience more stigma, right? And so people always ask us, they're like, you know, how come we don't have such active groups in the Northeast in California? We have no state director in California. Why don't we have groups in Washington, Oregon? Well, they're not experience that kind of stigma as much. So therefore they don't need to find the need to create communities. So looking at, we asked a series of questions on what people would like American Atheists to work on and other secular communities to work on for policy priorities. And this was the results there. It's not, you would expect based on a lot of Facebook groups that you're part of, right? With all the memes on church, state, religion stuff, that they would oppose religious displays on public property might be number one, but it's really not. It's public schools, right? It's not allowing discrimination based on religion. It's access to abortion and contraception. It's making sure that churches aren't involved in politics. It's not the things that you traditionally think of as atheist issues that people were most interested in seeing us work on. So the other piece of this is that local group engagement. People involved in local groups did all these different things. We were kind of asked about which things they had been involved in the past. And we asked about if they'd been members of secular organizations, and that meant the national secular organizations. So FFR, FCFI, American Atheist, AHA, and whether or not they were a local group member, so a group like yours. And you can see there's not excellent participation, but it's not terrible either. So what does that bring us to? That brings us to doing the things, right? And, you know, famously, I guess, one of my things when I was a volunteer and I was a Mid-Atlantic regional director is people would say, well, what we should do. And I would say, just go do the things, go out and do something, because if you don't do anything, then nothing will change about your group. And if you want your group to change, if people are coming to you and saying, oh, we'd like to get, you know, more active people, we'd like to get more younger people, we'd like to get more folks doing different activities, they can only do those if you provide those opportunities. So as I mentioned at the top, one of the things that excited me about American Atheists when I started volunteering for them is this presentation, actually, this part of the presentation. And they call it ACEs. It's, you know, organizers have long used other terms. I think SSA calls it CASE when they're talking about community groups, but it's about the same sort of ideas. So the A of ACEs is activism. Improving the policies of your school district, town, city, state, nation by engaging in direct advocacy, including protests, political engagement, litigation, and even running for office. So getting out there and doing the things and doing them openly as atheists or humanists or whatever your label wants to be, and making sure that folks know that that's where you are coming from, and being real active in your community makes it so that we are out there. The next, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Education. This is, a lot of groups are really great at this. The humanisty groups, right, all across the country are really great at education. Learn more about issues of today's expert on particular subjects, including policy, philosophy, history, and science. I would say take that a step further, and we'll talk about that, but bring in topics that are not just science and history and philosophy, right? A lot of people are tired of talking about whether or not religion is true, whether or not God exists. Like we're all there, right? We've all decided that that is where we're at. So we're kind of, a lot of folks are tired of talking about evolution, philosophy, and history, and they want to move on to newer things if they're younger and wanting to be more involved in groups. Oop, those showed up at the same time. Community, creating communities that are both fun and welcoming for atheists and those that are questioning their beliefs by providing support networks, opportunities for friendship and relationship building. A lot of groups do this really well too, right? This is Skeptics Night at the pub, you know, going out and having a drinking skeptically, hanging out in bars and after conferences, right? So that's how I met Mark and Carrie Renwick, right? Hanging out and talking and building community and being able to talk about stuff. And that's usually how a lot of groups will pull people in the first time. A lot of folks want to come and meet other atheists. I don't know how many of you have been to a drinking skeptically and a new person comes in and they're like, well, when do we talk about atheism? And everyone else in the group is like, well, we're already talking about like kids, school, grandkids, like what's happening over here in the town. Like, we're not going to sit here necessarily and chat about our atheism. And I feel like it's funny when new people show up and they're always like, well, I thought that's what we were going to do here. So most groups do that pretty well. And then service is another one, normalizing atheism and combating negative stereotypes of atheists, right? Because we're all baby eaters and terrible people. So if we're out there helping the homeless, if we're out there helping at women's shelters, if we're out there helping the local abortion clinic, if we're out there doing those sorts of things and wearing our atheist hat and our atheist shirts, then we're out there doing good things and we're getting rid of those stereotypes and building coalitions. So goals. The goals of this program are to grow and sustain a broad base of support and membership by appealing to a diverse community of atheists in your community, right? So you don't want the same people always showing up. You want them to come back. You want all your old folks to come back, but you want to engage in new activities that will bring in new people with new and different interests. You're going to increase your visibility of your group by engaging in high impact activism. So if you're at protests, if you are at pride things, if you are at whatever your local events are, I know that in Orlando, they do the Veterans Parade every year, right? And they get some visibility on them. But there's also visibility in doing things like writing letters to the editor and signing it as the president of your local Free Thought Society, right? Because then they're like, oh, look, this group is engaging on these issues and within our community, and you get to put out what your values are and what your positions are on those things. You combat negative stereotypes about atheists and atheism by demonstrating your involvement and through community service and community building and educational programs, right? So you're out there, maybe you're holding your meetings in the local library and somebody will come across that listing and they'll show up. And this has gotten so much easier online, right? At least with the educational pieces of being able to do these Zoom meetings and get the word out there. I heard people saying they found you on NPR, they found you on Facebook, they found you on Meetup. So it's getting easier to break down those barriers on some of these things. And expand the scope and reach of your group by building and maintaining a large and diverse membership and a network of community partners and allies. So you'll find that if you go out and do coalition work, which we'll talk about, you will gain members from those groups, right? If you're out there doing advocacy work with Equality Florida, you will gain members from that group. So why we do activism? Increases awareness of the issues. Increase the awareness of your groups by attracting new members. Attracts those firebrand atheists who are motivated by atheist identity and want to organize around that issue. Provide leadership opportunities for your group and members. Identify prospective group future leaders of your group, and help normalize atheism by showing activist partners we're committed to improving our communities and fighting for equality. And I'm going to add there, make sure that you are being a good partner when you do this. Don't just show up at a group and say, hey, can we do something for you? Or can you do something for us? You need to show up and volunteer really in something you're interested in so that it's authentic. So if your group is super interested in, there's somebody who's super interested in pet shelters and animal rights, then go and volunteer there and get people to go with them. Don't just pick something just because you think that's what you should pick. Really talk to your members and figure out what they're excited to do. So how do we get started with activism? Show up. It's that simple. Figure out what it is that you're interested in being a part of and get people there. Show up, see the sign they're holding? I have all these signs, the signs that Devin and I were talking about. If you're going to be at a Pride event, I will send you signs. And you know what I do? I go to a protest and I'm just me sometimes in a protest, and I have my signs and someone say, I like your sign. Here you go. Here you go. And before you know it, there's like 20 of us atheists standing around holding my atheist signs, and I didn't come with anybody to that thing, right? So you're increasing the visibility, and we're happy to send you those resources. We're happy to send you the signs. We're happy to send you stickers. We're happy to send you all of those things. All you have to do is ask because you're an affiliate. So one of the things we do with activism a lot, and as I mentioned at the top, we can talk to Devin about this later during Q&A, because we do a lot of work in state legislation, and Florida is one of the states that we're very active in working on this on. We put together this year pilot programs that are state advocacy teams. And I know that you mentioned that you have an advocacy committee that you guys are putting together right now. So perfect, we'll connect you and we can make sure that we're all in the loop together. Why state legislation, positive policy change is possible. I know Florida's been a super rough year, and it feels really frustrating at times when you're in states like Florida, Oklahoma, Arkansas, those states, but it is possible. And even if it isn't, even if you know going in that a law can't pass or will pass that you don't want to pass, you let lawmakers know that you exist. You also build awareness about your group, and you also will build those coalition partners and relationships. And I feel like that's very, very important, even if the end goal doesn't get achieved. And for instance, the moment of silence bill passes. I can't see Devin, but I'm sure she's making a face. There's Devin testifying, look at that, surprise. So testifying at hearings, that's me down in the bottom, testifying in Maryland. For Maryland is a good state, so I get to testify on positive bills. It's quite nice. It's a medical aid and dying bill. We've been working on passing here for the last 8 or 9 sessions, working with Compassion and Choices. They take the lead on it, but they ask us to partner with them and get information out to our groups. In the upper corner is Allison Gill. She's our Vice President of Policy and Legal. And she, I believe this is in Missouri. She was testifying on some terrible bill or other there because they have a lot too. Missouri is a very tough state to be doing state work in. Honestly, they've all been real tough this year. So lobby days. Lobby days are a great thing your group can do. I know that traveling all the way to Tallahassee is something that's pretty hard to do in Florida. It's a big state. But if you can get there for lobby days that are put together, even if they're with coalition groups, so if like Equality Florida is doing a lobby day, you can know about that and you can try to attend. Of course, most lobby things were virtual this year, so that was a little bit different looking in all of the state capitals where you could have a virtual lobby event. But it is often really fun. If you see that bottom group is the Arizona Secular Coalition. And so they have about 100 people show up for their lobby day every single year. And they, storm around the Capitol and talk about whatever bills are pertinent that year. And the upper left is Oklahoma, and Iowa is upper right. We have a state legislation tracker. You can put in your Florida state, click on it, and see which bills we are tracking in Florida. Obviously, your session is done for the year, so it will be updated again once we start a new session. Again, we have these state advocacy teams. If anybody's super interested in getting involved in this type of activism and advocacy, I can put you in touch with Devin Graham, who is one of the co-chairs with Sarah Ray for the Florida State team. I think there's 8 people on that team. Devin can clarify for me when we get back to Q&A. Oh, also sign up for action alerts. I can send all of these links to you all so that you have them in an email that you can send out to your members, all of the follow-up resources. The action alerts are specific to Florida, but they're also the national ones. So like right now we have one where it's pre-populated with a comment on a federal regulation that we're opposing. And so we send it out to everybody and ask them to click on the link, make it as easy as possible. It automatically sends to all of your state representatives and folks in Congress. Go. So working in coalition, I mentioned this. Hey, look, Devin Graham again. She's famous in this slideshow. That's the Equality Florida Lobby Day in Tallahassee. And down below is Larry Mendoza. He's our Virginia State Director, and they were doing a lobby day on medical aid and dying in Richmond. And then Jen Scott is in the background of the picture up top, and that was a rally on choice in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it was led by Planned Parenthood, but we were featured as speakers, and she helped organize the whole thing. So again, finding the group that we don't have to be the expert on everything. We're not going to be the expert on everything. There's a lot of groups that are out there doing really great work, and you can just tie into what they're doing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can find out what they're working on. And we're talking about state level, but this is also true at the city level, the county level, and so on. So community is that sea of aces. This one, again, most people find pretty instinctively easy to do. Have social events, make sure you do kid-friendly events, holiday events, support groups, tabling at events that are local, like Pride and Veterans Days and things like that. And every town has or county has their own things, right? Like we have something called Fall Follies, and it's a big thing in our town. And so we try to make sure we have a tent there because it's where people will see us. But you know, what you want to do is ask, again, your members which things they're interested in, and make sure that whatever committee is deciding which things to commit yourself to in these is a diverse group as well, right? Make sure that it's people with kids, make sure it's people who are younger, people who are older, people who are differently abled. Make sure that you have a wide range of people giving you input, because then you'll get a wide range of opinions on what you should do and attract different folks. Educational speakers, we talked about this. Educational programming will tell multiple stories and highlight a variety of perspectives about the same issue. But I like to also say, make sure you're tying it into, and we'll look at an example of it, make sure you're tying it into whatever volunteerism you're doing, right? Whatever other work you're doing. If you're doing volunteer work for Planned Parenthood and you're being clinic defenders, have somebody from Planned Parenthood come in and talk about the importance of what the work is they're doing. If you're advocating for science-based sex ed in the schools in your county and your state, make sure that you bring in somebody from like your local SECUS chapter, which is a national organization that deals in science-based inclusive sex ed. Bring in the experts, because again, we don't need to be the experts on everything. Bring them in to talk to you about what they're doing, and then find out what it is that you can do with them. How do we start doing service projects? Start off with one. You guys are already doing these. So this is a little bit like remedial for you, I think, right? But again, if you're doing community service and you're doing a road cleanup and that's really super successful, then maybe do that once a quarter and then move to doing something else once a quarter as well. Whether it's a food drive, a can drive, a coat drive. Find out if, you know, we have a group that just built a little local free pantry. The folks in Polk County are doing amazing things with their It Takes a Village program that they've put together there. And part of being an affiliate of American Atheists is you can benefit from knowing what all the other groups are doing and ask them what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and really build a network of folks and get some advice on things. Record your events. I'm going to add that, like, record your events for yourselves. If you're not, though, yet, become a Foundation Beyond Belief Network team and record your events through them as well. They have a whole tiered system where they will give you grants and t-shirts and things like that as you do more events for them and pay attention to your volunteer hours. They're great partners of ours. So Power of ACEs. So this is that piece I was talking about of bringing it all together. So if you have the activism and you're doing a state house protest and lobbying, so this one we're talking specifically about a group that worked with Planned Parenthood, and they were in close coalition with Planned Parenthood. So what they would do is they would go and they would do the protests, they would do the lobbying, they would do letter writing and phone banking on a particular issue that was passing in that state, or they were trying to pass in that state. They would bring in speakers from Planned Parenthood and have those outside experts come in and facilitate a discussion about why their work was really important. And then during that talk, they would also give the opportunities of volunteering for the local Planned Parenthood, right? So they would say, we need people to help with the volunteer women's shelter. We need coordinated donations of hygiene products. We need you to do these things for us. We need you to show up at this rally. And so during that educational piece, they would tell you what you could do for the service piece. And then they would all get together and have dinner and a movie night and hang out. And again, a lot of those folks that are involved in Planned Parenthood were actually non-religious. So then they became members of the local group. All right, so that was a lot of words thrown at you all at once. I am happy to have a discussion. I'm gonna stop sharing now. Oh wait, let me get to my last screen in case anybody wants my contacts.
All right. Thank you, Sam. That was a good overview. Yeah, thank you. You can unmute yourselves now, and let's open it up for some questions. ASL, right? Who wants to kick it off? If nobody has a question, I can start it, but let's go with Mark. Mark.
Yeah, a comment. I think, Sam, you have a 36-page report on the ACEs program that is a really good reference. Is that still available?
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of updating it. Jim Helton was my predecessor, and he put together the ACEs program and did a ton of work and recruited a lot of really great volunteers. We're tweaking it just a little. If you are familiar with the past version of ACEs, it used to be activism, community service, education, and then social. And we're just making that social piece a little bigger, because not community doesn't only have to be social, right? Support groups like FR, Recovering from Religion, fall into that community piece as well, in my opinion. And that's not necessarily a social aspect, right? So there's other ways to build community besides social. And also service is one word instead of two. And when you're OCD with graphics, it's one of those things. So we're rewriting that entire PDF. But yes, there it is still there.
Michael Reed.
Yes, I have a question regarding phone banking and advocacy, calling senators, representatives, etc. I'm a member of Unitarian Universalist Fellowship here, and they have a UU Justice organization, and I'm also a member of MoveOn.org and Change.org and others. And I send out emails, I phone representatives like Governor DeSantis and our lovely senators and representatives here. But I often wonder, does it really have any effect? They're already in the pay of the people who have supported them. Does my voice really make any difference?
So I'm going to give the generic answer, and then I might actually turn it over to Devin for the Florida answer. The generic answer is, obviously, the best thing to do is build a personal relationship with your local representative, right? My local representative in Maryland, again, I live in a very Republican area, knows who I am, knows the group that I represent, and knows my opinion on things. And then I've also built relationships with people who are in districts adjacent to mine that are friendly to my views, right? So I have one Democrat in Southern Maryland that is friendly to most of my views. We disagree on some things, but overall we agree. And Brian also knows me when I show up at town halls to talk about whatever issues are. And so building that personal relationship, if you then write to them, obviously it's going to have a bigger effect than our cookie cutter email that people will send. So that's the best and most effective way. Personalizing an email, even if you don't have that personal relationship, is also much more effective than our cookie cutter email, or even tweaking our email so the words are changed a little bit is more effective. Calling is effective more at the level if you have organized hundreds of people to call on an issue, because at that point they just check off yay or nay, right? Oppose, support, and they don't really have much more information other than that from their aides. So it's not super effective, but it is if you can put together enough people. If 5 people call, if 100 people call all on the same day within the first 3 hours of the day, that's much more effective, right? They know people are paying attention and engaged on that issue. Anything to add there, Devin, for Florida specifically?
Sure. So, like Sam said, like the action alert type emails, I think that it shows them that people are engaged, but it doesn't do all that much. But the personalized phone calls, I think, do make a difference when the issue isn't like a red meat issue. So if it comes to something like abortion or HB1 or something that's very extreme, where those legislators are already have their mind made up going in, all the calls in the world probably aren't going to make that much of a difference. But when it's something kind of middle of the road, like for instance, the moment of silence, granted it passed this year, so what can we do? But we kind of coordinated a real last minute, everyone, these are the people on the committee, the House committee, that are meeting for the moment of silence. Here are their numbers, here's their aides' phone numbers, call them. And I sent out an email the night before to all the committee members with our testimony, with like our written testimony. And I actually got a response from one legislator who's like, hey, I went into the committee actually thinking that I was going to vote for this, but then your testimony and all the feedback we got actually changed my mind. And so we didn't go down without a fight. Granted, it did pass, but I think I think things like that do make a difference when the issue is a little more middle of the road, if that makes sense. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, the calls absolutely do make a difference, I think, on most
I would say
issues.
it's an opportunity to find out what the opposition's talking points are too sometimes, even if you know the person opposes the bill. So again, going back to Maryland and my personal experience, we advocate for medical aid in dying. It's the 8th year we've tried to do it. It finally passed the House in 2019, 2020. The bill was pulled 2021. It was pulled because of pandemic, right? But it took that long to build people's understanding of that bill and what it really meant. And even though Maryland's a pretty positive state for those types of legislation, it still took all those lobby days of talking to legislators and finding out what their issues are, finding out how the bill could be tweaked a little bit each time it was introduced to get it closer to what they were willing to pass. And so it is a process. You don't just go in and you're like, well, here's a bill, let's get it passed. That's almost never happens. It's a process of educating both the lawmakers and also the public about why they should care about these issues, and then getting grassroots folks to engage on them. So for instance, again, my local representative, Brian Crosby, is a Democrat, but he is against medical aid in dying. And his reason is one that I hadn't heard before. So when I took it back to Compassion and Choices, and I said, his reason is that he's concerned about what happens to those hundreds of pills that are sitting in a medicine cabinet when someone doesn't take them, because a large population of people who actually get the medical aid in dying drugs never take them. And so then they're sitting in a cabinet. What happens to them? And there's probably ways to deal with that. I mean, my argument to him was, what happens to any of those drugs if somebody passes away and there's medicine cabinets full? That's probably something that needs to be dealt with on a much larger level. But it was a different objection than I had heard. So Compassion and Choices, gave me some talking points, and then connected with him with an MD and talked about, some of what his concerns were. And he still didn't completely change his mind, but he was open to the conversation. And so, I've also been kicked out of my other representative's office because he was like, he's a Catholic, he'll never vote for that, and threw me out. So it goes both ways, but you can figure out which folks you can talk to and maybe make some points that they hadn't thought of before as well.
Michael, are you okay? You want to follow up?
Well, I've also joined the Democratic Party, so I would meet representatives there, wouldn't I? Would I be able to talk to them personally?
Yeah, again, you should talk to whoever your local rep is, and then you should, even if that person is not on your side of the issue, you still should talk to them. And then you should try to build committee relationships with the folks on committees and certain bills. We have a whole training on sort of like the basics of advocacy. I'm happy to share the link with you all, or if you haven't seen it. But the whole process of a bill is, it gets introduced into a committee, the committee meets on it, they might change the wording of it, they have to pass it out of committee to go to the House if it starts in the House, and then vote on the full floor. The Senate does the same thing on the other side. Then they have to do what's called crossing over. They have to get the language in the two bills on the House side and the Senate side to match. And then it goes back out and gets re-voted on whichever side needs to repass it. So it's a whole process, and there's things you can do at each step of that process. If you can build relationships with the committee. So again, back to medical aid and dying, maybe it's the health committee, and I know that. I want to make sure that I build relationships with the health committee, particularly if it's an issue I know I'm going to be working on year in and year out, right? So if medical aid and dying is not going to pass the first year, you know which committee it's going to go through every year. Start building those relationships with those committee members. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Corinne.
Well, I just wanted to ask her a sort of a general question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see the top of your head.
Yeah, I know. I can't fit. I've tried, believe
That's
me.
okay.
And I have tried to fix that.
Don't try to fix it. It's fine.
At least you're not a cat, okay? You're fine.
Go ahead.
This is just kind of a general question, but referring to the one comment you made about sometimes you get kicked out of the office because they disagree, or they, for whatever reason. My question is, how do you act when that happens? When all of a sudden you're finding out that they're asking you to leave, you're getting kicked out of their office. I mean, I know you're gracious and all
Am
that.
I?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm assuming you're gracious and all that, but so, I mean, how do you act? And then do you follow it up again right away anyway? Do you try to come back, or do you just say, okay, well, that's it for that? Or, I mean, do you, if, when you try to go back, then do you feel like you're pestering them sort of a little, or are you concerned about that? Or just how do you handle that? That's my question.
Yeah, so the particular lawmaker I'm talking about is Matt Morgan in Maryland, and he's truly awful. He's real bad. So I know going in that he's never going to change his mind on this issue. He doesn't want to hear our talking points. He doesn't want to hear what we're saying. And I've been to his office 8 years, and I go every year because it's lobby day, and that's what we do. We go and split up who's going to which district, and we try to hit every single representative in Maryland and have somebody have a conversation with them, whether they're supportive of the issue or not. I will say another piece that Karen's familiar with is Matt Morgan also blocked me on his Facebook. So I then had to write strongly worded letters, and he unblocked me on his Facebook. So I guess part of it is, there's people like me. I don't care if I have a confrontation with a representative in their office or their staff. I mean, I'm not going to be yelling and have to be dragged out, but I'm going to say, here are my talking points. And I think that it's inappropriate for you to say, and just what I said, I said, I think it's inappropriate for you to tell me about his religious beliefs when I'm talking about a policy conversation. And I will say that directly to staff and representatives, because that's the point here, right? Medical aid and dying is an atheist issue because the opposition is religious in nature. It's because people feel like death and dying is something that should be left to God, and we don't feel that way. So I'm fine being confrontational. Devin is probably fine being not confrontational, but direct about her opinions with folks who disagree with her. But that's not everybody, and don't think you have to start there. When we do lobby days, we often are like, okay, you're new, we're going to send you to the friendly folk, and you're going to have a conversation about this issue so you can get used to the talking points and the questions and the sort of process. And then as you come back for a lobby days repeatedly, then we'll be like, hey, you want to go take on Matt Morgan? It's kind of fun if you're that kind of personality. I think it's funny. So, but not everybody would. Some people would freak like deer in headlights. Somebody's disagreeing with me publicly in this building that's all marble columns and fancy colonnades, right? It's very official. And some people will get really upset about that and nervous. And so I think as group leaders and folks who are organizing these things, you need to be really cognizant of that and pay attention to it, and know your volunteers when they show up, know your people when they show up, and ask them, have that conversation. Are you comfortable? Look, you're in like a super Republican district. Can I send Devin with you to talk about this issue with them so that you can kind of watch Devin engage in this way? And then maybe next time you would feel comfortable doing it yourself.
Just a
good.
little follow. Can I do a?
Can I just say one more thing to her about what the
Yeah.
one comment she just made? Okay, so, but I guess I'm asking, like I wouldn't feel, oh my gosh, he doesn't like me or something like that. But I guess the question is more like, how would you feel and act? You don't know exactly what extent they might go, that person might go, like what type of, retaliation or something like that they might try and take against you. Like they're gonna call the police and say, hey, get this crazy lady out of here, throw her in jail, or what? I'm just saying that's what I'm asking. Like, I get that they disagree with me or think I'm crazy or something like that, but that's not the part that bothers me. But what the part that bothers me is to what extent are they gonna act against me, to get rid of me? That's what I mean. Does that
I mean, you're not going to, if in this case, when you're lobbying, you're not going to hold a protest in a legislator's office over an issue, right? That's not why you're there. There are times we are there for that, but during a lobby day, we are not there for that. I mean, there's times in near DC, and so people will do die-ins in the hallways of the Congress, right? So that's a different issue than if you're there to lobby. If you're there to lobby, you want to make your point, you want to be heard, you don't want to be silenced, but you also don't want to cause a disruption in the state house in any way, right? Because that would reflect poorly on the group. So say your points, and be heard. And if they're telling you that they won't listen to you because they are Catholic or they are Christian or you are an atheist, then definitely voice your strong opinion about that statement on their part and then walk away. Devin,
Okay.
were you going to add something?
All right, thanks, Corinne.
Yeah,
Other questions from
I
anyone?
just want to do a quick follow-up.
Go ahead, Deb.
So yeah, if they ask you to leave because they will call security. But I've never seen that happen. And 99% of the time, even the opposition, even the unfriendlies are going to be civil with you. They might not agree with you, but they're going to be civil with you. And the reason being is that most of your meetings with lawmakers are going to be with their aides, and that's not something you should take personally. They're not like trying to avoid you. Those are the people that do the work. Those are the little voice in the legislator's ear. You want to talk to the aides, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, the aides they're very civil, they're very polite, etc. And even the lawmakers are. I mean, I've had some backlash from Randy Fine, but I can deal with it.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Fred.
I have a question.
Is this? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. We got two people. Let Fred hold your thought, Fred, and let's go to Karen. Thank you.
Is the group considering, this is to you, Ken, are you guys considering becoming an affiliate member, an affiliate group for American Atheists?
We are.
Okay, good. That's great. I can tell you that in Arkansas, the amount of support that I received just in actual physical things, different kinds of signs, buttons, pamphlets that make tabling so easy. We table at Pride Parade and some other things. For some reason in Arkansas, go figure, there's just a lot of gay people or people who have gay people in their families. So everybody seems to be very interested in that as equal rights. And at the Women's March and very good partnership with Planned Parenthood, you'll see that when atheists are under attack, when equality is under attack, atheists show up, you'll notice some of those signs are in pink. And those are the ones that we use for Planned Parenthood. And so I'm really looking forward to you guys hopefully becoming an affiliate that is, doesn't really change anything, but you get a whole lot of support so that the things that each person is interested in, like we had a person who was very interested in donating to Seven Hills, the homeless shelter here. So they would do a clothing drive every so often. And then we have a guy who manages the whole highway cleanup, which I just usually wave and say, gosh, you're amazing. And so it's really pretty cool. That's all.
I didn't even pay her. Thanks, Karen.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said, Sam.
I said I didn't even pay her for that plug. Thanks,
Oh,
Karen.
Right. Well, we are an affiliate, so
Yes.
and thank you, Karen, for asking whether or not we are. I thought I mentioned that in the opening remarks. Maybe I skipped over it, or
But you don't take advantage of those supplies. I know. So the point is still there, that we will send you boxes of things.
Right.
We're actually getting ready to rerun a whole bunch of things because obviously we haven't had a lot of stuff fly off the shelves for tabling in the last 15 months or so, for some weird reason. I don't know. Right. So we are going to, ramp back up making stickers and signs and things like that. So feel free to.
And the First Coast Free Thought Society is no different than any other people. We champion the underdog in so many different areas. It's not just atheism. It's not women's rights exclusively. It's not the LGBT. It's everything, everyone who tends to be an underdog in what the umbrella that we all live under, our Constitution. That's the thing that we work from. And then all these state and national, federal legislations, we have to address them. That's why we're trying to develop an advocacy committee and try to keep us informed. And that's why it's very important to us to have the advocacy outreach that the American Atheists do and other people do. The ACLU is a good one. There's a long list of people who are trying to do good work. And we want to align ourselves with a lot of those folks.
Please
Now, that's
do.
not to say that every goofball out there who's an underdog is somebody we want to champion. So we do this deliberatively and with a lot of thought. Sam?
And I would say that Emily Newman is my counterpart at AHA, and I don't know if you guys are involved with FFRF, but they all have resources that they like to give to affiliate groups, because we want you, when you're tabling, to have a wide range of messaging there, right? Not everybody wants our "it's your hell, you burn in it" sticker. People might want "do good without God," right? So we want to make sure that we have as many different kinds of resources out there for all of the different groups, so that when people come up to your table, they can be like, "Oh, this speaks to me," and take that thing, and hopefully give you an email, because that should be the price of admission for stickers.
Well, Sam, before I forget, you
Yes.
mentioned earlier, would you like some signs? And
Yeah.
whatever you've got, and if we don't have it, we would like it. So
Yeah,
maybe
I'll send it to you.
we can hook, you probably have our contact information. If not, Madeline can give it to you, and let's make that happen. You know, how that gets sent, I don't know, but let's make that happen. Is that
You
okay?
just give me an address, and I tell Anthony at headquarters in New Jersey, and he
Okay.
packs a box and sends it to you.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
for that.
welcome.
Let's go to Fred. Fred, thank you for your patience.
Oh, sorry, Fred.
I just had a comment about when on lobbying day, people usually bring something in writing to emphasize or to kind of reiterate what they're wanting to talk about, that they can hand to the aides. And even if they say, "Get the hell out of here," they can at least, well, here's our position. Please take it and at least consider it.
Yeah, so there's usually a one pager that goes along with lobby day with whatever the topic is. Again, you might be engaging in a lobby day that somebody else has put together, Compassionate Choices, Equality Florida. Some other group is running the show, so to speak. And that's great, because they've done all the hard work, and you just show up with your atheist button on top of their shirt. It's great. I advocate for that a lot. Do that. But if you are running your own lobby day, then you would figure out which bills you are specifically wanting people to talk on. Most lobby days will do a lobby training at the beginning. So they'll have like an hour or 90 minutes talking about what the talking points are, kind of maybe doing a little bit of role playing of what your talking points might be if you get involved in a conversation, if they ask you questions, and then they will set you forth upon the Capitol and have you go ask those questions. So yeah, definitely best practices is having a leave behind that is all of the talking points and all of the arguments and somebody's central contact information. So if you have an advocacy committee, perhaps the chair of that committee, if you have the state advocacy team, that would be Devin or Sarah. If you're doing it as a group specifically, then you would have your chair do that. They do have the best lobby days.
Okay. Other comments? Thank you, Sam. Fred, you have any follow-up?
No, that's it. Although I would like to admit that as a government employee, I'm employed at the courthouse. I've had customers that have been very rude and obnoxious, and just really wasting the clerk's time with asking them to do stuff that they are not permitted to do. And it's been times when I've had to say, "You don't depart. We're going to have to call security," because
yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. We don't want to, harass staff, and that's not a good look for us. But again, you do want to make your points made, and you want to make sure that you are heard. Courthouses are a little different than state houses and lobby days, but yeah.
right, yeah, because
Sure.
they'll say, "Well, the laws are what they are, and we can't change the laws."
No, definitely
As
not.
a courthouse employee.
All right. Okay. Other comments? David?
Yeah, I was curious, since you've been in the activism biz for a long time, if you have any examples of things that sounded like really good ideas when they were brought up and turned out to be exactly the kind of thing you should avoid doing.
Oh, so many. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
that's,
what would be some examples that spring to mind?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the do the things and see what happens, right? It's like, so throw crap on a wall and see what sticks. It's just one of those things where, someone will get real excited about doing a service project, for instance, and either not do their research on how to do it well, or they're the only person, like everyone expresses interest, but they're the only person who shows up. That happens a lot. I tell folks commit to doing like 4 of whatever it is that you've planned and have them be consistently like the second Saturday or something, so that people know that that's going to be coming for like 4 months in advance. And then if there's still no interest, either resign yourself to you're the only person doing it, which is fine. If you're the only person cleaning the mile of the road and you like cleaning the mile of the road, then keep doing it. Or pivoting. And it's okay. It's okay to go, well, you know what? We tried that. It just didn't work. It just didn't work. And so we're going to try something else. And there's no shame in that as organizers. I feel like sometimes people hang on to their ideas because they're proud of their idea or they have some ownership of it. And then when it doesn't work, they just keep doing it. And then they get frustrated and then they get burnt out. Right. And we see volunteers all the time walk away because they're burnt out because nobody wants to do it. And they said they did, but they didn't want to. Just pivot, just find something else to do. There's always people that are interested in doing things. You just have to be willing to listen to them. And then you have to, as a leader, get really good at delegating. That's another thing that our groups don't do super well, right? We'll have somebody come in and they're a really great volunteer and we'll just trust them to say what we're going to do in a group and kind of lead things. And then they have ownership of it as well. And so they won't delegate, or they feel like maybe they need to be in charge of the things. And you have to learn to let things go and let other people run those things, or you're going to burn out. And then we're going to lose you as a leader within your group or a volunteer within the group. So it's very important, that self-care piece that people don't do as activists. And it's, that's my counseling degree coming out. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Did that answer that question?
David, follow up? You're good? Okay. Other comments or questions from anyone? When I was in school, I remember the teacher standing in front of the room and just pointing to somebody who wasn't expecting it and saying, okay, David, round 2, or,
You have to do popcorn questions.
I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is, Sam, I'm going to follow up with you. And this is a reminder because you made this mention. If somebody's standing in the middle of the road cleaning up trash and nobody else is doing it, well, just keep doing it. That's great. Okay. Which reminds me is we're looking for somebody to take the point, to be the point person of organizing that for us. If anybody knows of anybody, or if you're that person, please let us know.
Do you have a road adopted already, or you're looking to adopt one?
We have all of the paperwork in place. We're ready to go, but we're not going to do it unless we can actually do it without just that one person standing in the middle of the road. Not in the middle of the road, but on each side of the road.
Don't stand in the middle of the road. The highway department does not like that in their cleanup volunteers.
We've done the homework. We're ready to go with all of the homework. We just want somebody who can show up. Now, and we all lead busy lives, so it's not easy. This is a big task. And at the end of it, it's good promotion and it's good community stuff. There's a lot of good things come out of that.
You get a free sign usually that people will volunteer. And so I've had a bunch of people find our meetup because they were so excited to see a humanist group have a sign. And I very carefully picked out our intersection. I live near a Navy base. And so it's one of the intersections that's super busy in the morning and everybody sits in traffic as they turn left on that road at this light, and my sign is right there. So I totally went and scoped out the list of highway bits they gave me to see which one I wanted my free billboard on. And it's a super effective way to get some new members. So good luck with that.
That's fantastic. So
I enjoy road cleanup. So
and you've done it and you enjoy it. And how many people show up for your typical road cleanup?
It really depends. And we've learned some lessons I can share with you about road cleanup. Don't do them in the middle of the summer. Don't do that.
And where is the road? Where are you? Which road? I mean, which state are you in doing?
In Maryland.
In Maryland.
Yeah.
And is it a busy highway or is it not a busy highway?
It's a state highway. So it's 2 lanes, but it's super busy. We actually live in a county where there's a lot of Amish people. So all of our shoulders are 9 feet because the buggies go up and down the shoulders on most parts of this road. So we're lucky in that way that we have a lot of space on our road. But our particular piece of road is a pretty busy intersection, and it's got a lot of waterways crossing under it. So the ditches are always full of really interesting things. This last one, we pulled a tire, an office chair, a crib, 2 strollers, a piece of carpet we have to go back and get, 9 bags of trash. I forget what else. Oh, a turtle shell and a golf ball. And they were like nested on the bridge. Like someone had found the turtle shell and put the golf ball in it. We find really weird things. I keep saying we should have like a bingo card across all of the affiliates to see if we can do road cleanup bingo. You find liquor bottles.
Are you worried
Fine.
about traffic? Are you worried about dangerous traffic and that? Does that give you any, concern?
And no, I mean, at least in Maryland, they suss out which roads are pretty safe for folks. They make sure that there's a certain amount of sidewalk and or shoulder space on them. They don't want you to clean the actual road. They want you to clean from the road over into the woods. So definitely wear tall pants and long pants, tall shoes, high socks. Because I don't know about Florida, but we get a lot of ticks in Maryland, and that's not fun. So bug spray, make sure you bring bug spray, and wear gloves because you will pick up some nasty things. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Other comments or questions from other folks? I have another one. You remember I remember my teacher who said he just was going to call on people. So I don't know if you're interested in that, but I might do it. So Sam, I do have I'm interested in something that, because of your educational background, because of your experience, because of what you've studied and what you've learned through your life, I'm interested in, and you talked about this a little bit, you talked about how to get somebody to care, how to get somebody to care about something that you care about that they don't know anything about. And you talked about having a conversation, and you talked about raising the awareness, but okay, great. Now, the question is, how do you get someone to care about how do you get a legislator to care about something that you care about that is not in their political interest?
So the best way to persuade people is through personal stories and personal experience. So you will find your most effective folks in lobbying are folks who are impacted personally by whatever law you're discussing. So I know that Devin just did a whole bunch of working on the trans bill that just passed in Florida of not letting kids play sports. And Equality Florida did a lot of work, and their most effective speakers were probably, if I had to guess, and Devin can tell me if I'm true, but parents of trans students, but also trans students themselves talking about the issue. It's very hard for a lawmaker to argue with a person who is sitting in the seat of the issue, right? If it's really hard in medical aid and dying to talk to a person and say, you know what, I don't think your loved one should have been able to pass peacefully, when they're sitting there telling you this really compelling story about how they had to watch their loved one basically stop eating and drinking and die over 10 days, right? That's really painful to watch. And so if you can make those human connections with folks and talk about those issues from a human place, even if they disagree with you on the bill or how the bill is written or what the law is, they're much more likely to listen and at least consider your point of view. So that would be whatever the issue is, figure out some way to make it personal.
Right. Make it personal, make it anecdotal.
Yep.
All right. So, and that's how you get along in life most of the time. That has nothing to do with trying to persuade a legislator. That's often what we do, just meeting other people. We share something about ourselves. They go, hey, I like it, or no, you're weird, and move on, or whatever they say. But this American Atheists and the First Coast Free Thought Society have this thing that you talked about, and it's over some people's heads, and you use the word stigma. Stigma. I don't know if people in this room think there's stigma involved or not, but there's some sort of shyness in dealing with what others might consider confrontation. So when even just sharing a story, you find there's more confrontation or less confrontation, and spend a little more time about dealing with confrontation.
Yeah, so again, I think that you find less confrontation if you have shared a personal story and painted yourself as a human, right? If you are sharing stories about your children, your loved ones, your parents, you notice at the top of this, I tell you about my history as an activist, starting a group and then growing a group and then bringing my activism bigger and bigger. There's a reason I start with that story, because I want you to understand that I'm not just some person who's never run a group and never been in a group and never started a group coming here to tell you how to do things, right? I've lived that experience. And so generally folks are more willing to take my advice because I share that. There's a lot of other folks in different organizations who won't talk about themselves in that way. And it's also a certain vulnerability, because I can tell you, David asked about the things that I screwed up on. Definitely I've screwed up on things, no problem. And I'm happy to share that vulnerability as well. So, I think that anytime you are willing to open up your story, willing to open up yourself and make that connection with folks, you're less likely to have direct confrontation. And again, not necessarily in lobby day, because lobby day, people aren't going to necessarily confront you in that way all the time. But in life, right? I mean, I wear my atheist shirts out all the time because, what are they going to do? Call my job instead of I'm an atheist? So I'm lucky in that way. But that was before I was employed by American Atheists. I did that too. And it does take a certain amount of courage and being willing to have those conversations in a way that doesn't escalate into, like a public brawl in a supermarket over my shirt. We're not doing that, but it does spark some conversations sometimes, and both positive and negative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other comments or questions? Anybody? Fred?
I just have another comment about how effective do you think it is for like our local group or any local group to kind of affiliate or have common events with other groups that may not have the same exact precise interest, but have something that's kind of at least related. Say let's say gay activist group, or a animal rights activist group, or so on and so forth, or for abortion rights or so forth. This I think that's a effective means of trying to broaden the group and get more people involved in both groups.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, coalition building, finding groups that you have issues in common with. Again, going back to a local story here, we had a sex ed class that was canceled in the local library. It was a person who wanted to come in and do a class for teens, and the very conservative Christian community in my area put up such a fuss that the library canceled the class, mostly because the instructor was a trans person and gay, and not really because of anything to do with her qualifications. And that was most of their pushback. And she was the keynote speaker of Slut Walk, which, if you're familiar with Slut Walk, it's anti-domestic violence event, right? Like, it's supporting people who have come out of domestic violence. And so she was the keynote, and they had a field day with that. Slut Walk. Why would you want your kids to talk to somebody who's the keynote of Slut Walk? It was ridiculous. So the library canceled it, and we, Southern Maryland area secular humanists, stepped up and hosted the class in the library according to the meeting room policies. And it caused a huge stink in our little county that we did this. We had protests, and we had counter protests, and we had police there, and we had all this stuff. And there's only one progressive-y group in Southern Maryland at the time besides us, and that was Together We Will group post-election. And there was no LGBTQ group. So for me, one of the great things that happened about that was there was all of this free publicity for our group, letters to the editor, back and forth for weeks in the paper, but also it sprung out and started a PFLAG. So because of all of that, folks in the community realized, wow, there's really not any support for the LGBTQ community in Southern Maryland. And so a PFLAG started from that. And then we had a drag queen story hour, and we partnered with them. And so it was co-hosted with PFLAG and Smash. So definitely either get involved with groups that exist or help groups form in those other identities, because a lot of those identities are very intersectional, right? I think it's 50% of LGBTQ folk are also nuns and non-believers. So there's clearly going to be a lot of crossover in those issues and in the communities. So yes, for sure, do that.
Thank you.
Do that thing, Fred.
All right. Other comments or questions? If not, I have one. All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead. Sam,
Yes.
early on, you mentioned a survey and you asked, did we take it? And I have a sense that there might have been some dismay in that we didn't show enough hands, or if any, of having taken the survey. So maybe there was one. All right. Okay, that's great. So what and I confess I did not take it. But I'm not sure I even was presented it. So that's a possibility. But my question is, how many people did you send the survey out to? What was your response rate? And what did you learn from the survey?
Yeah, so we learned a ton. I could do a whole other hour conversation on that. We had 34,000 respondents to the survey. It was pushed out a lot on social media and email lists of our partner organizations. So I couldn't really tell you how many people it got sent to. If FFRF sent it to their entire list, Black non-believers sent it to their list, AHA sent it to their list. So we had a bunch of partner organizations helping us promote it. As I mentioned, we were expecting Topside to get 5,000 to 10,000 people to answer. And within a few days, we had surpassed that, got to 34,000, actually had to shut the survey down, because if anybody's done this sort of data research, you pay per respondent for the research committee the company to do all of the data. And so having that amount of data was excellent, but also real unexpected and a budgetary concern for us at that point. So we would love to do it again. And people have asked us, are you going to do that survey again? And we might, but it's something we need to plan a little better for. So what was really interesting about the data we got, and again, there's a full report. I can send you the link to that, or I can drop it, US Circular Survey, into the chat. And it's really interesting reading, because one of the other things that I thought was great about it, about the survey in particular, is that we had a huge percentage of people. There was two kind of open-ended questions in it where you could just type a paragraph or two or about your experiences. So if you said you experienced stigma, you could describe what you mean by that, right? You could say, I had a child in school and they were bullied, or what, they could share those things. And it was an inordinate amount of that kind of data that was given to us, that people shared their stories. And we're still figuring out what to do with all of that. But one of the things we did is we did pull quotes in the report that say, a woman of whatever age in Maryland, and a quote, and it goes with the graph. So it's really interesting hearing some of those personal experiences in the survey data. There is a archived webinar on that too, from when we did the release of both of the main report and then also of the youth report. We did one with Kevin Bowling from SSA, and he was our co-speaker on that. So definitely, I would, Devin, put the link in the chat for me. Thank you. And you should definitely read it. It's real interesting. And again, we had a lot of anecdotal data. Like, as organizers, we feel like probably people are more stigmatized in areas of the country where people are more religious, right? But we didn't have that data piece, and we didn't know what kind of stigmatization they were experiencing. Rejection of parents, rejection of loved ones, their kids being bullied. So we got a lot more sort of round picture of what that kind of looked like for them.
And does that change how you're going to approach
what?
Your activism?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where it was actually really gratifying, because one of the things that I found interesting with my degree, right, is there is a huge number of people that reported that if they were a part of a national organization, but also a local organization, that they had much less, because we also looked at depression and loneliness scores for people. How lonely are you? How depressed are you? And anybody that was involved in a group had, I think it was a 33% better rate of outcome of not being depressed and not being lonely, because they were in these places that felt so isolated. And then they would find this group and they would realize there were other people like them. And again, making that human connection is real important. So we've always thought that, but now we have data showing that it's true. So if you're a data nerd, you will love all the graphs.
Okay. I thank you, Sam. Some of the folks came in a little late. So I'd like to have the opportunity at this late moment in our conversation, our dialogue, our chit chat, is to learn about Jory. I wonder if Jory is able to tell us, hello, Jory. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And are you affiliated with the American Atheists, or is this new to you? What's your story?
Fairly new. I've known that I was an atheist for quite a long time, and it wasn't until a couple of years ago that a friend started talking to me about some of their beliefs, non-beliefs, and membership, that I learned that humanism existed as an idea and a group. And it kind of, from there, you know, just shot off to all the other different groups. I started reading and researching, and kind of just opened a door for me. So it was so interesting when she was just giving that survey data saying, oh, you kind of feel like you think this, but there's not really a group for you, or there's people out there like you, but how would you even know? And for whatever reason, I had just never looked into it. So once that door was opened by this friend, I really dove in. And so now we started a new chapter of humanists in Chicago called the Chicago Humanist Group. And we're slowly growing. We hit a little over 60 members, and we've been a group for just a little over a year. So that's sort of my background. And yes, I did miss, I think, some probably really interesting points in the beginning of this talk.
Oh, that was the best part. I'm sorry, but you know what? This is recorded, so you can go back and play the tape.
Thank you, and yeah, thanks for allowing me to give an introduction. I'm really interested in hooking up with a lot of these.
Oh yeah, how did you hear about us?
Oh, it must have been through Twitter, I want to say, or yeah, I'm trying to follow all these different groups, and as soon when I heard it was the Free Thought Society, and then I heard the topic, I knew I wanted to attend.
Well, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you have a
great
question,
conversation.
any comment relative to Sam, other than what you just said? It was beautiful what you said. I appreciate you speaking. I called on you, and you weren't expecting that, but I appreciate you. You know,
I was vigorously shaking my head when you were mentioning teachers calling on people at random, but
it happened to me all the time, and I was like, "What? Me? What? Who?"
No, I'm really happy to meet everyone, and I haven't asked any questions because everyone's been asking so many excellent questions. I love the idea of Adopt a Highway. If there are other people attending who had other initiatives similar, like getting organized with community cleanup or working in gardens or other sorts of volunteerism that they've found, especially ones that are relating to the environment. I know Emily Newman's name was mentioned, and she's been trying to think of new ways for our organizations to do good in the community related to the environment. I've been trying to work on that. If anyone has any experience that they want to share, I would love that.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on what Jory had to say, or further questions or comments for Sam? Anybody?
So Jory, we have a lot of groups who are doing really, really great things. Secular Week of Action just passed, and I can put you in touch with some folks who had some pretty interesting ideas. Again, Foundation Beyond Belief is a really, really great resource for thinking up how to do service events, resources for how to plan service events, and then even if you become a 501c3, they can give you grants and money to do those things. So if you need funds to get started, you can do that. As we mentioned, Adopt a Road is always a great way to start. Adopt a Park is another way. If you have that local to you, you can also, some cities will let you adopt greenways, like the on-off ramp area of freeways, and you can put a sign there and plant a little garden. So there's also look at your local environmental groups and see what they are already doing. Once again, plugging into what others is doing is a great way to get started when you first start organizing, and then you can branch out from there. So if there's already some environmental group doing a river cleanup or a lakeshore cleanup or whatever in Chicago, then find out what they're up to and then plug into what they're doing and then show up. But again, wear your humanist shirt, wear your atheist hat, make sure that they know who you are. Another great service event that's not necessarily environment, but one that I like a lot, and I don't know if there's a chapter in Chicago, is it started off being called Christmas in April, and most of them have pivoted to taking the religious language out of it and are called Rebuilding Together. And so it's like a Habitat in Humanity, but they pick the last weekend in April, and they will go out and fix up. They'll put together teams. So you can sign up as a group and sign up as a team, and then go and volunteer for them. And then you can, they'll put together like a dozen houses that they're re-roofing, repainting, fixing things, pulling out floors. Often they're either disabled or veterans or older people. So they might need wheelchair ramps built. They might need something like that. So that's a really great one if you have one of those in your area to tie into. A lot of our people in our community are hesitant to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity because they have religious ties, and that group is a much more secular version of the same kind of work. So I like them a lot.
Okay, very good. Well, this is the last call for a comment, a question. Last call. You've had your chance. Well, I'm okay. Then we're going to wind it up, Sam. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your energy and your advice and your wisdom and everything that you've had to say. You've given us things to think about.